Welcome to This Week in Privacy, our weekly series where we discuss the latest updates with what we're working on within the Privacy Guides community. And this week's top stories in the data privacy and cybersecurity space, including Google slowing down the AOSP release schedule even more, California residents getting some new tools to opt out of data brokers, Italy finding Cloudflare, and more. I'm Kevin, the community news intern, and with me this week is Nate, a content producer. How are you, Nate?
Hello. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Privacy Guides is a nonprofit which researches and shares privacy related information and facilitates a community on our forum and matrix where people can ask questions and get advice about staying private online and preserving their digital rights. Before we talk about the concerning developments with Android, let's update people on what we've been working on with Privacy Guides this week. Um, so, as for me, have quite a few. Firstly, I want to announce that I am officially leaving the staff of Privacy Guides as a community news intern. I will still be involved, of course, with the forum and still be contributing an occasional article or so, but I'll be transitioning more towards a super volunteer esque role. Um, what this means is that I will not be appearing on this podcast anymore. However, I'm still always here if you ever want to contact me, like either on the forum or even like via email later. But then again, I plan for this to happen on the 14th. But yeah, anyways, while I am sad, this is my final episode. It's been an absolute privilege and honor to work with like a community I've always been like involved with like indirectly over the past few years. Having started as a lurker, I've always been really afraid to actually get started to learn more about what it means to like s- help others with their privacy journey and feel more confident about securing myself and the goals and lives of my family members. And I think Privacy Guys has done a lot for me personally. I've learned from an amazing community of IT specialists and privacy enthusiasts alike, and has allowed me to meet amazing people here like Jordan, Nate, Jonah, and M. And so far, I just want to say that is I really enjoyed my experience over the past year, and I'm so excited in the future where I can help out with other projects as well. Speaking of projects, I've also released a new article on Hushline. So for context, Hushline is kind of like a whistleblower platform. It's something I've been working on for quite some time now, like having like interview that's founder Glenn Sorrentino, and I'm really excited to announce that my review of the platform has been released as of today. So if you go to our website and click on the articles, you can now read it right now and just give me your thoughts. I'd say I'm always happy to look to learn any feedback from you. If it is my final week so far. Anyways, Nate, how are the video content production going?
Yeah. First off, let me say you will be missed. It's been a pleasure co-hosting this podcast with you. I'm glad that you will be sticking around in some capacity for sure. So, uh, we have actually just today, just a couple hours ago, we did release a new video for members. It is a extended adaptation of a long time ago. Em wrote an amazing blog post called "Privacy is Like Broccoli," and she talked about how I mean, I don't want to give too much away, but it's how to um, how to make sure your privacy journey is effective. Let's put it that way. How to make sure that your privacy journey is always progressing and you don't get overwhelmed. So we have made a video adaptation of that. Again, it's a loose adaptation. I definitely added to it to give it more. I mean, it's a blog versus a YouTube video, right? It's never going to be a one to one, but yeah. So that just came out for members. So if you are a member, either on YouTube or on our website directly, you should have access to that now. And I just wanted to shout out the Shorts channel. The Shorts channel is growing really fast. We were talking about that before we went live here, and we've already got several hundred subscribers. Our videos are getting almost 1,000 views on some of them. So if you're looking for a channel where you can get like, especially this podcast, we clip a lot of the stuff we say on this podcast, the stories we talk about. So if you're looking for something where you can find like a little bite-sized thing that you can share with people, definitely go check that out. And we are going to have a ton of videos coming up this year. So again, the obligatory subscribe on YouTube, PeerTube, wherever it is you want to subscribe, and keep a lookout for those because they're going to start rolling off the press pretty soon. And with that, we will go ahead and dive into our big stories for privacy and security from the past week. Our main story this week, like you said, Google is now only releasing Android source code twice a year. So, for those who don't know, I know we say this all the time, but for those who don't know, Android is open source. There is the very basic, and Google does a lot of their stuff like this too, like the Chromium browser. There's like a very basic source code that is available for anyone. And then Google adds on to that to make the Android for like pixels and stuff. But also like Samsung and LG and all these other companies, they add on to it and they make their own version. And so that's why everybody has kind of a little bit slightly different, but at the same time, they're all very similar. So historically, Google has been releasing the source code for nearly every new version of Android, and that's typically within a day or two of the Pixel getting updates. However, starting this year, Google will now only be releasing the source code twice a year, and that will be, I believe, in Q2 and Q4. Google has actually been undergoing a lot of changes like this, and has slowly, I hate to say, they've slowly been becoming less and less open source. So um, I could be wrong about this, but I think this started last year. I mean, it's probably been coming a long time before that, but it really kicked off last year when they decided. So I mentioned they published the source code. Well, they used to specifically publish the Pixel source code. I'm not a developer, so I'm probably going to get some of the finer details wrong on this, and I apologize. But specifically, they would publish like a version of the Pixel source code, and that's how people like Graphene and Calyx were able to create their versions so fast. Is because they basically had a ready-made version, and then they could just go through and pick out like, oh, we don't want these parts, we want to add these parts. Boom, it's ready to go pretty quickly. Graphene especially is very, very fast at that. However, last year Google said, "Well, we're not going to publish this anymore. We're going to publish a version that's basically kind of like a virtual machine, and that way developers can still make their apps, but the actual OEMs, like again, Graphene and Calyx, they have to reverse engineer it, and it can take months in some cases to do that. Most likely, we're still kind of seeing the fallout for that because this is a fairly new change, but it's definitely slowed down the release process. And uh, I know Graphene was also specifically said, like, we'll see where this goes. Like, we may not even be able to keep working on pixels. This is such a difficult process. So, again, we're still kind of feeling that out. The one saving grace is that Google has been releasing monthly security updates, but I believe only certain people are privy to that. I think there's a program that you have to opt into, and they're very protective of who they let into that program. So yeah, this is just kind of another step in that trend where Google is kind of rolling this stuff back and saying, okay, now I believe the article said they used to release quarterly updates, and now they're only going to release two. So they're basically cutting it in half, twice a year. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of where it goes. Google, if you go to their developer website, there's a quote there. It says, "For building and contributing to AOSP, we recommend utilizing Android latest release instead of AOSP main. The AOSP latest release manifest branch will always reference the most recent." Yeah, so very very complicated stuff here. Kevin, let me ask you, what do you think this means for Android phones? Do you think this is going to be hugely disruptive more, or do you think this is something that they're going to be able to push through for the ROMs that we love and use?
Yeah, so for starters, I don't think this specific action is catastrophic, right? As you may know, when Google delayed Android 16 Q Part 1, which was, I guess, the last one of the last quarterly releases of, you know, last year, um, as you may know, it significantly delayed the onboarding and the implementation of Graphene OS into the latest Pixel 10 lineup for months. So it was a rather annoying thing encountered by a lot of Graphene OS users, and for me as well, as someone who like owns a Graphene OS phone. But the only reason why I even bought a Pixel is because I finally supported the day I was planning to buy a phone. So whatever. I think it's like it's only concerned if Google doesn't have a consistent time frame. I'm a lot more worried about Google's future intentions with the open source project rather than at least this specific action, primarily because at the end of the day, the security updates are what really matters for vast majority of users. Of course, there comes the issue of porting, for example, because I may notice um, Google is planning to release these updates in quarter 2 and quarter 4 of each year, which just happens to like coincide with the Pixel A and the flagship Pixel series releases. And so it appears to me that they're trying to at least like streamline that update cycle, I guess, trying to like synchronize like the Pixel team with the Android team. But then again, it is still a step towards the wrong direction, regardless of what they're trying to do. At the end of the day, it seems like you're trying to focus more on heavily promoting the Pixel and trying to synchronize Android and the kind of like integrate it more with the Pixel like lineup, rather than it being friendly towards people who rely on the Android open source project. At least that's what my view it is. Then again, though, like I don't foresee this to impact future releases of Graphene OS or any other sort of custom ROM out there. Obviously, it will be very unfortunate. But still, as long as they don't delay these releases as they did before, I don't particularly foresee like any issue with it as long as it's properly communicated. Um, then again, though, I'm not saying the problem will end there. What if they, for example, continue these delays with these rare releases? What if they, for example, decide to even close down the Android open source project entirely? Um, we would never know what's entirely going on, and it appears that they're using this excuse of like a trunk-based like development model, and they're claiming it's more secure and it's more like efficient, and maybe it is. Um, but then again, though, like Google owns it essentially owns Android, regardless of it being open source or not. And the fact that we're so reliant on one company proves to show that it's in fact inherently quite dangerous. We wish there are other alternatives out there, but there aren't. So having to like rely on the news of one company trying to switch things up, even if it's for a good like reason, it will still impact everyone in the ecosystem, and not just the open source community, but also other phone manufacturers as well. What if one day Google decides that, you know what, we will not be helping out, Samsung or Chinese manufacturers as well? And we don't know if that will happen, of course, but hey, like anything's on the table now. It appears like the current trend has went from, Google fully collaborating with other OEM manufacturers and open source community to develop Android collaboratively, and then closing down, like their development process from the open source community to now reducing like these like releases. Like there is a clear trend here, and it's quite disturbing. And even if like it's not the end of the world that this happened, it's still like a concern that you should definitely monitor in the future.
Yeah, definitely agree. I did notice that this does coincide with their releases for the Pixel series and the Pixel A series. I noticed that too. Um, yeah, it's unfortunate. Google has, like I said, they've been kind of taking steps away from being very open source friendly, and I feel like in that context, this is not the worst thing they've done, but it's also just continuing that trend, which is really unfortunate because even people who don't really like aren't really privacy enthusiasts, people who aren't like, oh, I use graphene because it's super secure and super private. A lot of people pick Android over iOS because it's open, because they can sideload, because they can modify it and tinker and do things that you just can't do on iOS. And you kind of have to wonder at that point, if they go fully closed source, like what's really their selling point? It's just a different UI. Like, okay, but it's exactly this, and maybe a little bit cheaper than an iPhone, but it kind of loses a lot of the selling points the more that they close it down, and the more. And I forgot to mention that too for listeners who weren't aware. The whole, like, they're cracking down on side loading and they're trying to make it more difficult, which they say is to crack down on scams, which is probably part of the motivation, but I don't know if that's like the best way to do it. So yeah, it's really unfortunate to see them like step away from. They built such a passionate community. Again, not even talking about privacy. Like Google has built such a passionate community of enthusiasts who like to have a device they can tinker with. And I feel like they're really going to burn bridges the more they step away from that.
Indeed, I agree 100%. And let's not forget the fact that the Pixel is surprisingly a huge success, despite the fact we tend to complain a lot about its AI first focus, or the fact that Android is slowly being closed down entirely. Um, Obviously, like if you get a Pixel, you would think you will want it because it's completely open. You can flash entirely ROM in it, you can sideload things, and you get the latest and greatest updates, making it even much more secure than its competitors and with other OEM manufacturers. But it seems to me that Google's focus on reducing performance, closing down the ecosystem, um, what else? Oh yeah, also like not even releasing like continuous updates to the open source like project itself proves to me that they can get away with a lot of it. These sales for the Pixel line has increased drastically compared to like when it first released. And while obviously it's nothing compared to the iPhone, right, or Samsung, the fact that it's actually seen an increase in sales proves to me that there is actually like a really good selling point towards being like an AI first, privacy invasive like phone, which also is on paper is still quite secure due to its hardware security features and fast updates. Like once again, like it's a bit of a tough pill to swallow now, knowing that Google is actually actively being rewarded by this. Um, and it makes me sad because like first for me, like I appreciate the Pixar being like open to the community, but if Google continues to like, close it down even further, there's nothing people like us can really do anything about because guess what? They're still being rewarded because people are primarily buying the phone and not flashing their phones. They're using stock Android and they love the AI features. Um, just because we don't like it, it appears to be on paper that these sales prove the opposite. Google is being rewarded for these horrible actions, and it goes to show that wow, maybe like we don't have a much of a voice or impact on Google as we thought. Maybe we had some impact based on the fact that we were able to like convince them to let us allow side loading, at least after a bunch of dialogue prompts, of course. Um, but then again, there's very little room to compromise when one company owns this entire ecosystem, and I don't know what to do, Nate. Like, seriously, it's, like, concerning now.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate because like I feel like we have this I've had this discussion a lot in the past on surveillance report when we talked about this stuff is like I want there to be more options. You know, I want to root for Linux phones. I really do. I think that'd be amazing and I think that'd be super cool, but they're just not there especially for the average user. You know, the two options are basically the what is it? The Purism, the Librem phone, which I don't know much about phone hardware, but I'm told the specs aren't really worth the price they're charging, or the Pine phone, which it specifically says on the website, like this is for early adopters and developers. Like this is not ready for the community. So it's really unfortunate that we don't have like a really mature third option that could easily take that plate. Because even I have a Pine phone, and I swear to God, it's granted it's an older edition. It's the what is it, the Braveheart edition. The battery literally can't last a whole day. It will sit on my desk, no phone calls, not playing music. It just sits there and by the afternoon it's dead. So there's really just not a good alternative. And I wish there was. I hope there will be. I hope that the Linux phone will mature and there will be good options, especially at the rate things are going. But right now, I'd be hard pressed to like pick one and say, "Oh, this is a really good choice. We should look into this."
I also want to emphasize the only reason why we still recommend, like, the Pixel and, maybe if you do have an iPhone, that's not an official recommendation, by the way, is because they do have, like, verified boot or at least some form of support for it depending on whatever custom ROM that you use. In our case, we recommend, the Pixel with Graphene, right? Or just otherwise just use stock Android or stock iPhone and try to configure it a little more to like be a lot more privacy respecting, which is of course is a difficult task. I'm not gonna lie. Uh, but I also want to keep in mind that using like alternatives, like the Linux phone, for example, um, they have a lot of security drawbacks here, unfortunately, which makes us not be able to recommend it despite their privacy benefits. The lack of verified boot, for example, makes these phones a lot more vulnerable to targeted spyware. And unfortunately, regardless of operating system you use, someone could still like make a malware just dedicated towards like Linux, for example. So it's never anything inherent about like a Linux phone that makes it more like secure than this an Android or like an Apple phone. What does make it secure is verified boot. What does make it secure is like having a really good like sandboxing or rather application sandbox between all these applications, meaning that these apps can't really communicate, for example, like your location at all times if you don't allow it to. Linux by default lacks a lot of that, and while you could like configure that, of course, I am not sure if any of these Linux phones like have enabled some form of application sandbox to a point where it's like on par or superior to Androids or iPhone's model of application sandboxing. So unfortunately, like even if like there's a lot of privacy drawbacks with like stock Pixels or stock iPhones, like there's still like very clear security benefits though of having that and also faster updates.
Yeah, for sure. I'm with you. I know that Linux does have a lot of things you can configure, like depending on what distro you're on. It's oh my god, what is it? There's one for snaps, like App Armor, I think it is.
Mm.
I
I think
could be
there's
wrong. Again, I'm not a
FireGel
Linux.
SC Linux, I
Yeah,
believe. Yeah, Secure
that's
Blue
one of
like
them.
has
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of things you can do, but, yeah, like you said, I don't know how they compare to, like, Android and iOS and the sandboxing they have built in. And the other thing, a big thing of my personal concern, personally, when we talk about these kind of things is the average user. Like, we want privacy to be accessible to everyone. It's not good enough to be like, "Oh, well, I know code, and I know how to fork this thing, and I know how to tweak all the edit." Like, default settings are defaults for a reason, and it's because they benefit the company. So we need to have defaults that protect the user as well. You know, that's a really big part of this discussion. Is it's great that we have these tools that we can custom flash our phones and modify and fork and this, that, and the other and compile, but the average person isn't going to do that. Like, just real quick, I remember years ago, I was working on a job site with a client. And I think we were like waiting for somebody to email us back or something. So we were all kind of just hanging out, chatting, and somebody got like a spam call on their iPhone, and they were like, "Oh, I'm so tired of these spam calls." And I'm like, "You know that there's or I didn't even tell them, you know. I'm like, "Yeah, that's why I went in and I turned on that cuz I had an iPhone at the time. I was like, I went in and turned on that silence unknown callers thing." And there was literally like you could hear a beat of silence, and then the pin dropped, and like three people in the room went, "You can do that?" And it's like, yeah, it's right in the settings. And I had to go show them all where it was in the settings. But like people literally do not check the settings at all. So if we don't have this kind of stuff built in by default, first of all, it's already a huge ask to get people on a Linux phone. But let's pretend we had a fully mature, user-friendly Linux phone. We can't expect people to like go in and mess with the terminal and roll their own code. Like people don't want to mess with the terminal for the most part. That's something exclusively that we nerds like to do. So it's really important that whatever distro we build, that it has all these kind of security features that you're talking about built in to try and give people the best privacy and security by default. So
Indeed, and like, I'm sure we'll have more conversation about like spyware later. But I think it's actually fun now to talk about another wild story just broke today and it's still developing in Italy. So in their next article by Torn Freak, Italy has fined Cloudflare 14 million euros for refusing to filter pirate sites on public DNS. So for context, right now, I just want to clear that in 2024, Italy introduced Privacy Shield, which was aimed at stopping sports piracy. Think of it as like your an illegal streaming website showing like broadcasts of a football game or soccer for us Americans here. And the thing is, like this piracy shield has insanely broad blocking powers aimed to block these domain names and IP addresses within 30 minutes without no due process and without any sort of appeal process. And as you may expect, it has been accused of blocking legitimate services too. And though Cloudflare isn't particularly an ISP, it has been caught up with a number of these orders, and now they're refusing to filter their DNS service, specifically 1.1.1.1. According to this article, I'm just going to read out a quote here. The dispute centers specifically on their refusal to comply with AGCOM, which is their communications watchdog in Italy, Order 4925 cons, which was issued in February 2025. Cloudflare reportedly refused to enforce these blocking requirements through its public DNS resolver. Among other things, Cloudflare countered that filtering its DNS would be unreasonable and disproportionate. The company warned that doing so would affect billions of daily queries, have extremely negative impact in latency, slowing down the service to legitimate users worldwide. AGCOM argued that the company is known for its complex traffic management and rejected its suggestion that complying with the block order would break its service. After weighing all arguments, AGCOM imposed a $14 million fine, a 40 million euro fine against Cloudflare, concluding the company failed to comply with the required anti-piracy measures. The fine represents 1% of the company's global revenue, where the law allows for a maximum of 2, Italy admitted. So in many words, they're actually trying to make an example out of Cloudflare. Now, first, I just want to like quickly explain what DNS filtering is for those who may not know what that means. First, for me, I get confused by it all the time. But imagine the internet as in like a public home address network, right? Your computer is one home address. This one server in Italy is another address, right? This is called the IP address, which is like a list of numbers. And the idea is like every time you connect to a website, you're essentially sending tiny things called packets, data packets, that are transversed the entire internet across, routed across many servers until it reaches like the final server, which is the website, of course. But to do that, it needs something called a DNS resolver or domain name resolver, a domain name service. And essentially, what happens is that when, like, for example, you configure a DNS filter, what you're doing, you're essentially like having a filter right before like the packet reaches your website. And then this filter would drop any packets that come from a specific source, right? So, for example, you could configure a DNS filter through a VPN connection. That's just through Movat, right? And they have a DNS block list that contains everything from blocking malware to ads to adult websites. Um, the same that goes for like companies, IT admins and entire countries as well. DNS filtering has been used by countries to like censor and block entire the entire internet. They can simply order their local ISP to, for example, block internet access from this country to everywhere else in the world. So what you see usually through like, some sort of like online map is that when such order is filtered, all of a sudden the DNS will simply stop resolving packets from the source. So this is how like DNS filtering works. And what Italy is trying to do is get Cloudflare to kind of like filter like their DNS like service from any of these like piracy like related domains. Obviously, Cloudflare has been known for being very agnostic towards like its service. It tries to be like an infrastructure as a service provider, meaning that it doesn't like is not necessarily like required to take down anything. It really wants to implement that because like they do have a very strong stance for free speech, which has led to issues in the past. For example, you might have heard that Cloudflare refused to initially take down websites such as Kiwi Farms or the Daily Stormer after a lot of very controversial incidents. So of course it has a very very messy history of like responding to censorship requests as they may view it because they're trying to be like an infrastructure company, not necessarily a platform content. But it appears like a lot of people don't really believe that that's the case for Cloudflare. Um, Normally that would be the end of the story, right? But today their CEO Matthew Prince have posted on X/Twitter that of course like this fine happened, but this has escalated so much further, to a point where they have, I quote, are threatening to withdraw from Italy entirely. Um, they're trying to, like, challenge this fine entirely, but they're also claiming to not only withdraw millions of dollars in pro bono cybersecurity services we are providing to the upcoming Winter Olympics in Milano Cortina, but also they're planning to discontinue, Cloudflare's free cybersecurity services for any Italy-based users, removing all servers from Italian cities, and terminating all plans to build an Italian Cloudflare office or make any investments in the country. And in this tweet itself, of course, um, the CEO like directly cited how like the current U.S. administration is trying to like build some sort of free speech network when they're trying to like target these like EU like enforcement operations. So the idea is like historically the U.S. has been kind of sort of hands off when big tech like asks for something, but now though, like the current administration is focused more on like trying to prevent these illegal like enforcement operations from occurring in the first place. So this CEO is planning to visit DC to lobby with a bunch of lawmakers, including Vice President JD Vance. And I was also like mentioned like Elon Musk, like and agreeing with him, saying that free speech is critical, is under attack by these quote unquote out of touch cabal of disturbed policymakers. And finally, to like kick the nail in the coffin, he's also planning to visit with the International Olympic Committee in Lausanne to essentially like outline the risks of the Olympic Games, try to get them to pressure Italian government to withdraw this fine. So I think like this is a huge escalation, Nate. Like I'm honestly kind of shocked by this even like happened in the first place. Normally this would have just been a fine, right? And just another fine happened and the Kafra would just absorb it. But it appears to be that like the CEO is trying to escalate this a lot to like an international fight. And I am frankly like I am shocked by this. Like, what do you think about this?
Well, I mean, to the CEO's defense, I don't think this is just a fine in the sense of like, oh, Meta had a data breach, so let's give them a fine, let's give them a little slap on the wrist, and we'll just all move on with our day. This is definitely something that the Italian government, like you said, they're trying to make an example out of Cloudflare, and they've even said that like the reason they went for such a relatively large fine is because Cloudflare is a big company, and they're hoping that other companies that do things similar to Australia or excuse me to Cloudflare. I read Jordan's comment in the live chat. They're hoping that other companies who are in the same industry will see that as a warning and be like, "Ooh, we should fall in line because otherwise they'll fine us, 1% of our revenue." or whatever. And it's I don't think it's just going to like go away if they paid the fine. But and I think the Cloudflare CEO, that is one thing that I do really appreciate about Cloudflare. And it's such a gray, complicated area. Is they try really hard to be like, it's not our responsibility to police what people do. It's our responsibility to provide the service. And again, that's a very complicated area. Like, it's very easy to make the argument that if they're hosting something illegal, if they're hosting abuse material, if they're hosting cyber criminals, like obvious cyber criminals, should they intervene? Probably morally, yes. But at the same time, that quickly becomes a slippery slope into like, okay, well, what about activists in a repressive country who are criticizing a government? And so I think that's why they try to be as hands off as possible. Is like, let's not become the moral authority on what is and isn't allowed. Let the countries figure that out, and then we'll go from there. But as we can see here, yeah, it's this is kind of a I feel like Italy's going a little bit overboard. The article says that this privacy shield thing has already caught a number of very legitimate services in their crosshairs, and it, the CEO of Cloudflare makes a really good point. He's like, he says, quoting his tweet here, he said, "It required us not just to remove customers, but also censor our DNS resolver, meaning it risked blacking out any site on the internet. And it required us not just to censor the content in Italy, but globally," which is absolutely insane. Like, could you imagine any one country saying nobody's allowed to look at this thing anymore because we've deemed it illegal? And that's basically what Italy's trying to do. So I think he has some really valid points. Um, I think, yeah, it's a pretty wild escalation. It feels, from my perspective, like it went from 0 to 100 like overnight, and obviously it didn't. The story or the article says this started all the way back in like February of last year, or I think so. Yeah, the order was issued in February 2025. So this probably has been building for a while, but it's pretty crazy. The it does feel, I don't know. Again, it's a gray area. Like, is it one of those things where you should use every lever at your disposal, or is it coercive? The fact that he's like, "Oh, we're going to discontinue our pro bono services to the upcoming Olympics. We're going to discontinue free services to anyone in Italy. We're going to remove our servers from Italy. We're not going to build an office to mess with their economy." So, yeah, it's, I don't know. I think nobody is I think this is one of those situations where there's no like black and white. Like, nobody is clearly right here, nobody is clearly wrong. I think Italy is overreaching a lot in their attempts to stop piracy, and I'm not even going to get into that because I know a lot of our viewers have opinions on piracy that are not in discussion right now. But I think Italy's really overreaching. But yeah, it's whew, that's a hell of an escalation. I think that's where I land.
Yeah, of course. And I also want to give some additional context like to a story now, Nate. So like obviously sports is a huge thing like in Europe, especially like even if you're with the La Liga in Spain, right? A lot of these like sports broadcasting companies and these like sports clubs are hugely in favor of these sort of like shield laws, in which like listen, if you are caught streaming this, you'll be immediately blocked within 30 seconds. And similar laws have occurred, like I believe in Spain. I believe they're trying to propose a similar like shield law in Wyoming for some reason. Like it's called. I'm honestly kind of surprised by that fact. Like, why Wyoming? Anyways, that's besides the point. I'm sorry for those who are in Wyoming right now, but this like privacy shield laws are horrible. All right. Regardless of whether you believe that, the Cloudflare CEO is acting irrationally or not, like I get it. Like maybe like, he's having a bad day and he decided to post this very long rant on Twitter, right? But at the end of the day, like these shield laws should not be encouraged. And I think like it's good to have some sort of like legal fight against it. Of course, like it is a huge escalation to withdraw like pro bono cybersecurity services. And the fact that Cloudflare is de facto like an established player and kind of like a given to use if you really need anti DDoS protections. Like I'm not saying like Cloudflare is like one of many options, and oftentimes they're one of the few like reputable options out there like that could actually prevent your website from being DDoSed. Um, and it's concerning though because Cloudflare has continuously like provided like these cybersecurity anti-DDoS like protections against a lot of very questionable websites. But it's kind of saying, okay, if someone uses a VPN, right, to protect their browsing habits, and one of them has to be a criminal, should the VPN be like liable for the fact that the cyber criminal used their VPN? I guess it's kind of like that. Like, there aren't the website hosts themselves, they just, like, provide some cybersecurity anti-DDoS services towards these websites. So it kinda goes without saying, though, like, one question I have, though, which I'm not sure if, like, anyone really knows, is why is Italy focusing so much on Cloudflare? Like, can they already use, like, ISPs, their local ISPs, to block, these websites entirely? I'm sure they've already done it, but why target Cloudflare? Like, it's kinda like the equivalent of, like, targeting, like, some random, like, VPN company because, like, someone, like, just happens to do something bad on it, you know? It seems to me like a bit of an overreach and over, like, reactive, like, like, punishment towards a company, which at the end of the day just only really provides, like, DDoS protections. Like,
Well,
they aren't the
it's
content provider, right?
not usually, but and I mean, they do a lot more than DDoS protection, really. But that's yeah, that's probably what they're most famous for. I mean, why Cloudflare? Because they're not just some random small company. Like Cloudflare is very well known, and a lot of I mean, we've seen multiple times now in the past that like Cloudflare has an outage, and literally like a third of the internet will go down. So Cloudflare is it's almost like a lot of smaller countries, especially in the 2010s and 2000s, when you'd go there, they or a lot of elderly people will do this too. It's not like I'm thinking of the book Careless People by that lady who worked at Facebook. She said that when she went to Myanmar, Facebook was the internet. Like when she met with the Myanmar government, they were like, when they found out she was from Facebook, they're like, oh, you're from the internet because everyone used Facebook. So it was the internet. And, I'm sure a lot of us know like an elderly person that like Google is the internet. Like they're not trying to get on the internet. They're trying to get to Google. They're trying to get to YouTube. They're trying to get to Facebook, whatever. And that's kind of how Cloudflare is, whether people realize it or not. A lot of the time when we try to get on the internet, we're trying to get on Cloudflare because they're just so ubiquitous and so prevalent. And because they have, in some form or another, whether it's the end user went and downloaded the 1.1.1.1 app, or they set that as their DNS, or whether they're not even worried about that and they just go straight to like Discord, for example, they're interacting with Cloudflare in one way or another. So it's a really effective way for them to push this agenda out to large swaths of the internet simultaneously. I think that's why.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, like, if you are, like, someone who's, like, lobbying for, like, anti-privacy legislation, you want your confidential copyrighted content to not be distributed to anyone in just one country because at that point, like, just use a VPN, you know? So, like, I feel like, ironically, this is probably part of a ploy to ensure that less people can access this type of content regardless of what you use, you know? And it's definitely like a little bit disturbing, because obviously, like, what happens in one country stay in one country. Um, but then again, though, like, I have, like, encountered a lot of, like, counter, like, opinions actually, Nate. Like, on the forums there, but one user, like, I'm not gonna, like, say their name, of course, but one user kind of mentioned, like, this is kind of like a weird form of, like, economic imperialism by the US in a way, because at the end of the day, like, it is Italian law, right? You got to follow the law no matter what, and you may disagree with it, you may try to circumvent it, but at the end of the day, it's the law. And if the U.S. successfully does intervene in this case, as they've done multiple times, in not only like weakening the GDPR and like ensuring that Apple gets to return from its fight with the UK after the Investigatory Powers Act, um, is it like moral though for a country to intervene in another country's affairs just because their company, um, you know, cries to daddy or something? It appears like a lot of people do feel that way because I guess the mainstream approach, at least, but most people take is piracy is bad. Don't download legal things, right? So it's hard to argue with that, unless you're one of those people that are sailing high seas, right? And so when you try to argue with like legally, it's like a country trying to force its own law, and then a country intervenes in another country is like to get everything out. It's such a messy situation. Is this a form of like American imperialism? I'm not qualified to discuss that. I have honestly no idea. Like maybe like a few university professors can debate that in a forum someday. But what I can say though, is that there is definitely a growing trend of the Trump administration actively interfering with like within like the European market to ensure that these enforcement actions just don't like interfere on like things that may constitute as a freedom of speech violation, and not necessarily just within that European country in question, but also when it impacts like other countries as well, such as the U.S. So it appears to be the current like position held by the Trump administration and by extension the U.S. government, right? And so I'm excited and intrigued to see how this plays out. Like, will JD Vance actually personally travel to Italy to like help Cloudflare out? I don't know. We don't know if that happens. But what I can say though is there's definitely a lot to like discuss morally though, and so like I'm just gonna leave this to the viewer now. Is it morally right for the U.S. government to interfere in this? You know, regardless of whether you like disagree with this law. Um, could it be like pro piracy, for example, be anti U.S. imperialism? Possible, it's true. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts though.
Oh man. I don't know if that's a good idea. No, because it's my bigger concern. I mean, that is something I think about. Okay, to be totally honest, and trying to be as nonpartisan as possible, that is something I've been thinking about a lot in the current administration, and especially this year with. Again, we're not a political podcast, so I'm trying to
Of
keep this
course, we're
very.
not political. No, this was not my opinion at all. I'm just like staying it out here, you
Or
know?
let me rephrase: we're not a partisan podcast, so let me try to trying to stay away from that. Like when the U.S. went into Venezuela, for example, from what I understand, most of the Venezuelans did not want Maduro. He lost the election. They didn't want him there. Does that give us the right to go down there and forcibly remove him? I don't know. I don't. It's not
We're
fun
not
stuff.
qualified to speak on any partisan matters.
Exactly. But like you're saying, like it's really, and that's just one example. This is the same thing. Like, is it okay for? Because it's one thing for Cloudflare for the CEO to sit here and say, "Oh, we're gonna withdraw our services and try to pressure people." Like it's their company, right? They could do that if they want to. Should they? Again, that's a moral debate, but
Yeah.
that's a distinctly different thing from saying we're going to go back to DC and try to get the government to pressure the other government. I don't know. That is pretty crazy stuff. I'm not sure what the right answer there is, but
Yeah. I
I
think
the
the
big thing that
correct
concerns me
answer
for
though.
sure. What's that?
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say the big thing that concerns me, which isn't really an answer to that, it's kinda like pulling away from it, but it's
Mm,
it's just the fact that again, it's the slippery slope. It's like
yeah.
you said, oh man, last time I said this on the air, this turned into like a weeks long thing. Piracy is illegal, point blank. And you could make this argument about whether or not it's morally justified because you never really own the thing and streaming services and this and that. That's not my point. My point is it is unarguably illegal. And like you were just saying, laws exist and you're supposed to follow them. Supposed to. So it's one thing for the Italian government to say, we want to stop piracy because it is illegal. But that could very quickly turn into a slippery slope of like, well, what if we stop all these other things? And I know we always talk about the slippery slope, but we see it play out over and over where it starts with like, oh, we'll stop this one thing that is definitely illegal. And then we'll also just kind of like start to crack down on other things that maybe aren't illegal, but are kind of inconvenient. Like, what if we just ban websites like I don't know, meetup.com where somebody's trying to organize a protest. I don't even know if they use meetup in Italy, but you know what I mean? Like it becomes a slippery slope of like, oh, well, that was easy to block piracy. Now we can block these other things. And the tech savvy amongst us will always find workarounds. But again, the average person won't. And kind of going back to what we were saying about phones, if you stop 90% of people from being able to organize, then just using that as an example, if you stop 90% of people from being able to organize, that's 90% of your protest gone. So even if it's not 100% effective, it becomes good enough. And that's personally what I'm really worried about.
Yeah, indeed. And I definitely do like believe that uh defaults are important, right? Without defaults, without easy solutions to anything, like people won't actively do anything to circumvent, a potential website block, for example. If you see that one day Google is blocked, what are going to do? Just use wherever it's available. You don't like use a VPN to access Google. Um, but I heard like just going back to the US for a bit, like I heard like there's a interesting way of implementing a default, like something that's one click. Like, oh, what is that again? Like I heard they have a new law.
Yeah. So we have some good news for a change. This headline comes from Ars Technica. It says the nation's strictest privacy law just took effect to data brokers' chagrin, which um, it's been a while since English class, but I mean, I think chagrin means like annoyance. So 2 years ago, this comes from California, of course, because love them or hate them, they are kind of leading the way in privacy here in the US. 2 years ago, California's Delete Act took effect. It required data brokers to provide residents with a means to obtain a copy of all data pertaining to them and to demand that information be deleted. Unfortunately, Consumer Watchdog found that only 1% of Californians exercised these rights in the first 12 months after the law went into effect. The chief reason was that residents were required to file a separate demand with each broker. And quick pause, I have visited the data broker website for one reason or another. I want to say there's thousands of them or close to 1,000. Like, yeah, it says here with hundreds of companies selling data, the burden was too onerous for most residents to take on. Like, yeah, that's pretty insane. So, on January 1st, a new law known as DROP, the Delete Request and Opt Out platform, took effect. DROP allows California residents to register a single demand for their data to be deleted and no longer collected in the future. Cal Privacy then forwards it to all data brokers. So, starting in August, so it hasn't quite taken effect yet, but I think it's available now, is the thing. So, I guess you can kind of get a head start on it, and companies can choose to comply or they can wait until the deadline. But starting in August, brokers will have 45 days after receiving the notice to report on the status of each deletion request. If any of the broker's records match the information in the demand, all associated data, including inferences, so things that um, they may not have directly submitted or directly collected, like, here's my name, here's my date of birth, things like inferring, oh, you probably make about this much money based on your address, or you probably are maybe gay based on who you live with, something like that, which companies do that all the time, in case you guys didn't know. Anyways, if any of the records match, including inferences, it must be deleted unless legal exemptions, such as information provided during one-to-one interactions between the individual and the broker, apply. So there are some exceptions, but I mean, I think if you're directly interacting with a data broker, that kind of makes sense. Um, Although I guess you should still have the right to be forgotten. So yeah, scratch that. To use Drop, individuals must first prove they're a California resident. So unfortunately, that is the first hurdle if you're trying to take advantage of this and you're not Californian. The author says, I used the Drop website and found the flow flawless and the interface intuitive. After I provided proof of residency, the site prompted me to enter personal information such as any names and email addresses I use, and specific information such as VIN, a vehicle identification number, and advertising IDs from phones, TVs, and other devices, which I'll talk about that in just a second. He says it required about 15 minutes to complete the form, but most of that time was actually spent pulling the data from different locations, many buried in the system settings. It initially felt counterintuitive to provide such a wealth of personal information to ensure that the data is no longer tracked, but as I thought about it more, I realized that all that data is already compromised as it sits in an online database, which are often easily hacked and, of course, readily available for sale. What's more, Cal Privacy promises to use the data solely for data deletion. Under the circumstances, they said they felt like enrolling was a no-brainer. They also went on to say it's unfortunate that the law is binding only in California. As the scourge of data broker information hoarding and hacks on their databases continues, it would not be surprising to see other states follow lead, which I hope they do. And just as a last note, he mentioned that you have to go find your device IDs and stuff. I'll try to make sure we include this in the newsletter and the sources. But the markup has an article that goes through how to find like your VIN, how to find your advertising ID on iPhone, on Android, on I believe several different models of popular TVs. Like it's a really good place to start if you're interested in taking advantage of this. So yeah, some good news to start the year off. Finally, what are your thoughts on this, Kevin? Do you think this will be effective? Do you think we'll see other states start to follow suit on this?
I'm very interested in a statistic in which only 1%, or is it one? Yeah, 1% of Californians only actually deleted their data from these data brokers in the first 12 months after the original Delete Act was enacted. I was like, wow, people really don't go out of their way to do this. I think a lot of it has to do with ignorance, of course. You can't be expected to know that, that is under your rights to do so in the first place. The fact that you must file a separate demand for all these companies is honestly annoying. So I don't blame them, honestly. But I feel like the drop act is so important. It makes the process so much easier. And I honestly at this point I wish I was a Californian just so I exercised that specific bill immediately. But the fact that in the US you have such you have a federal system, right? So the fact that this law is only binding in California means that a lot of us Americans are out of luck. It's very hard to get very similar legal protections within the US, much less other countries as well, where they actually do have strong and data protection legislation, such as in Europe, for example. Um, so yeah, I don't really have a lot of thoughts on this article. So the fact that it's really nice to see really good news, and I hope that other states do follow along and to make data deletion a much more seamless process here. Um, the fact that only one click is needed to delete your data from 500 data broker companies, is also very neat, but also scary because first off, why do 500 companies have my data? Why is the how? I didn't consent to this. Shouldn't they be paying me for my data? How much is my data worth to me anyways? I feel like these companies should pay me at least $20, $50. But hey, they're not doing that. They're collecting for free anyways. So what a shame.
Yeah, I don't know. I wish I could remember the argument, but I've seen articles kind of arguing against that whole idea of being paid for your data because I think the argument is that it kind of distracts from the point of like it's the consent aspect of it, right? Like you just said, like I why do these 500 company and oh man, that was a fun one. I years ago on the New Oils TikTok, I did a video about oh, which one was it? I think it was the Move It data breach. It was one of those data breaches that just went on for like 6 months, 8 months, a year because it was a third party breach that just kept impacting people. And I will never forget there was somebody who commented and they said that they were like 16 years or no, they were trying to explain to their non-English speaking immigrant parents how their 16-year-old daughter's data ended up with this company they've never heard of because apparently they got the letter in the mail that was like, hey, your name and social and all this were caught up in the data breach. And it like to me that's such a perfect snapshot of like how messed up this whole data broker thing is that like you never consented to this. And even if you do take the time, the 40 hours to read the terms of service and the privacy policy, they're so vague, like, oh, we reserve the right to share with our trusted business partners, which includes 123 data brokers that you've never heard of. And yeah, it's such a frustrating thing. I could rant about that all night, but it's really unfortunate. It's great to see that California is making this super easy to just opt out from everybody all at once because the idea of going through one at a time is completely insane. And it reminds me of not to ramble too much, but Kerry Parker, I think last year, like early last year, he went ahead and embarked. Kerry Parker from Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons. He went ahead and embarked on the whole data broker removal thing, and it's I don't mean to make fun of him, but it's kind of funny as somebody who's been down this road myself. At the very beginning of it, he's like, I'm going to go through and do it manually, and then I'm going to write up some blog posts about what it was like and tell you guys the pitfalls and what to look out for. And by the end of it, his tune had completely changed, and he was like, that was a nightmare. I'm never going to recommend that to anybody. That was awful. Just pay for easy opt-outs, which for the record is a service we do recommend at Privacy Guides if you want to do it automatically. If you want to do it manually, go for it. I did it manually for several years, and it's really difficult. So, and that's just what a handful of people search websites. That the idea of doing that with 500, 800 data brokers is just I don't know who would have the time for that. It's insane. So, yeah, it's great they made it so user friendly and so simple, but it's only going to do so much because I'm not in California. I'm not a California resident. When am I going to have access to this? When can I tell those companies that I didn't consent to this, that I don't even know who they are? Why do they have my data? Yeah, we really need a national privacy law. Which I know there's been a few attempts at that. And there's the problem with a lot of them. They've been like, here's the limit, and you can't do more than that, which is really not the law that we need. We need a law that says here's the bottom, and you can do more than that if you want, but you need to at least do this much. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a very daunting
Anyways.
task for sure. And like if you're definitely concerned about these services, but you don't live in a jurisdiction that allows for easy opt-outs, please visit our website at privacyguys.org. And we do have in our recommendations data removal services that can help you with the process. As Nate mentioned, easy opt-outs is what we officially recommend. We also have a list called the Big A censored data broker opt-out list, and where you can, if you choose to manually opt out for some reason, there is a huge list of hundreds of like these companies, and feel free to start the process at any time. I think finally though, like if you want to use like a free tool, you can use Google results by you to actually find like where your data is on the internet. And I know using Google to stop these data collection practices sounds kind of funny, right? But then again, it just allows you to find data about yourself on the internet and like make sure that if you do have a potential stalker or abuser harasser to find your personal information, you can actually like look at the data is publicly available and take it down either manually or through something like easy opt-outs. um, then again though, there isn't really a lot of things we can do if you don't live like in a jurisdiction like California or the EU, but there's still like ways for you to manually do it yourself. So yeah, be careful out there, folks.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. All right. So there's a disagreement brewing between Proton and the founder of Standard Notes. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But first, I think we do have some more good news going on. The founder of a spyware maker has pled guilty. Kevin, I think, it's your go. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that one?
Oh, of course, of course. So I think like Nate, you covered this in a past like podcast before, like like the story of pcTattletale, which is a stalker software, meaning it's a at least a quote unquote legal, not legal software that you can purchase with a license or subscription to essentially spy on anyone you want, be it your employees, your partner, or your family members. And what happened to PC Tattletale, this like essentially what was a legal spyware application was um, they were targeted by a hacker, and these hackers they defaced the website and had sparked a data breach of all of the people that actually used the software in the past, which was quite frankly devastating for this company. It shut down really quickly after that data breach a few years ago in 2021. But of course, like what happened was that just because you shut down your company and they claim to you comply with the investigation doesn't mean you have not broke the law. And it appears that the founder and CEO of PC Telltale, Brian Fleming, has recently entered a guilty plea. He pled guilty in a San Diego court on Tuesday to charges of computer hacking, the sale and advertising of surveillance software for unlawful uses, and conspiracy. And ironically enough, like this was actually like spearheaded by agents within the Homeland Security Investigations Unit within the U.S. Immigration Customs Enforcement. I'm not sure why. It seems pretty random to me, but hey, things happen. But anyways, HSI began investigating PC Tattletale in mid 2021 as part of a wider probe into the industry as consumer grade surveillance software, also known as Aware. This is the first successful U.S. federal prosecution of a stalker operator in more than a decade following the 2014 indictment and a subsequent guilty plea of the creator of a phone surveillance app called Stealth and Genie. Fleming's conviction could pave the way for future federal investigations prosecution against those operating spyware, but also to those who simply advertise and sell covert surveillance software. HSI said that PC Telltale is only one of several stalker websites under investigation. In December, provided to TechCrunch by his lawyer, Marcus Borasa, Fleming claimed that he genuinely had no idea that his product violated any laws, and that the moment he learned the issue, that he shut everything down and fully cooperated with the investigators. Um, of course, like this, like shutdown happened in 2024, following this data breach, and more than 138,000 customers who assigned to use the Pizza Hotel had their breach information with the data, according to like a data breach notification site called "Have I Been Pawned?" However, according to like a special agent Nick Jones of the HSI, he said that PC Data stood out because it was specifically advertising spyware for surreptitiously, I can't pronounce that word, spying on spouses and partners, according to a 2022 affidavit in support of a search warrant for Fleming's home. The affidavit was unsealed in early December 2025 ahead of Fleming's anticipated plea hearing. According to this, this warrant was acquired in 2022 following the search of his email accounts, in which the emails showed that Fleming knowingly assisted customers seeking to spy on non-consulting, non-employee adults. So, I just want to say, like, for starters, for my reactions, that this is like honestly insane. How did you not know? How did you not know that your software is being used for this like type of thing? Like, come on, man. Like, it's one thing to like lie like into the press or lie to your lawyer, right? Or lie to the court, but it's clearly like you advertise your service as a way to target, domestic violence victims, right? To target, like quote unquote cheating spouses or whatever. Uh, but like Nate, like I guess your thoughts. I want to hear your thoughts on this though. Like, what is this funny to you? Do you think it's funny? Because I think this is hilarious though.
I think, to be clear, yeah, I think obviously the situation is not funny. Just to clarify, like
Yeah,
I
for
know what you
clarification
mean.
purposes. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's horrible that people do this. But yeah, it's so funny that it's literally, "Oh, I'm sorry, officer. I didn't know I couldn't do that." Which I don't know how many of you guys get that reference, but it's like you totally know you can't do that. And to be advertising it specifically for like catch your cheating spouse, and like we all know what you mean by that. It's completely ridiculous. I'll tell you right now, if your relationship has deteriorated to the point that you need to put spyware on your partner's device, just leave. Okay? I normally don't tell people like just leave your partner, but you're done. If you've gotten to that point, it's gone. So my wife can hear me. She has thoughts. Um, but yeah, it's completely insane. And the fact that he tried to really play that, and I love how you said that too. Like I know what you meant, but you're like, it's one thing to lie to the court, and like, I mean, yeah, go ahead and lie to the court. That's perjury. We'll just add that onto the charges. Like, Yeah, it's funny because when I was reading this and I was like taking the show notes, I wrote that originally that I wrote that when it's the whole like, oh, he didn't know this was illegal, and as soon as he found out, he blah blah blah. And I'm like, either he is lying or he is genuinely like the dumbest person on the planet. And then the more I kept reading, they're like, oh, they specifically found him advertising for these purposes. And I'm like, oh, so he's lying. Okay. So I just deleted that part of the notes. But yeah, it's oh man. It's so sad. It's so, so sad. And it's just yeah, I mean, I'm gonna make fun of this guy because he sucks and he totally deserves it. I have no sympathy for this guy, but it's just really unfortunate that people do this at all because like you said, a lot of the time, 99% of the time when this is happening, it's abuse. Because here's the thing, every company I've ever worked for that uses like the mobile device management thing, which I'm with you guys, I would argue is corporate spyware. I call it corporate spyware. Every single one of them tells you, and at least here in the US, they can't legally make you use it. So they're like, if you want to access your emails, which I don't want to access my emails off the clock anyway, so I don't care. But they're like, we'll put this thing on there just so you know, this is what we can see, this is what we can't see. If you're putting it on there without somebody's consent, that's abuse. Like full stop. I don't care what your reason is. Like, and we covered that story the other week about the girl who was kidnapped and her dad was able to find her. I really hope that she knew that that was enabled. I really hope that her parents sat her down and were like, hey, we're turning on this feature. We're going to know your location. Here's why. It's, again, if you get to the point where you have to enable that against somebody's will, I mean, maybe arguably if it's like somebody with dementia and it's like, yeah, but if I tell them they're not going to remember and they're not going to do it, so I do it for them. I don't know. Maybe that's kind of a gray area, but 99% of the time, no, no, just don't do it. No.
Yeah, yeah, of course. And I'm gonna like mention this like as I have in past like podcast episodes. Like during my time with like clinical and tech abuse at Cornell, like I spent like 2 years volunteering with that. Like one of the things that we've actually were trained to look for was consumer spyware software. And mind you, like what differentiates what separates something like pcTattletale or any other stalkerware like service to an actual like targeted spyware suite such as Pegasus is that these like apps are actually available fully on your device. You could view that you have pcTattletale installed, right? Ideally, I'm not sure about the specifics of the software. Maybe it is actually like like target spyware, and you actually don't know if you have it installed or not. I don't know
I
the
mean, they
specifics of that.
usually masquerade as something that's hard to
Yeah,
detect. Like, it won't say PC Tattletale, it'll say, like, a news app or something, but yeah, it's
probably.
it's
Yeah, yeah.
it's much easier to find than something like Pegasus for sure. I get what you're saying.
It is, yeah, for sure. So usually like is an installed app on your phone, right? And it hides between that, or it directly it'll tell you, oh yeah, my name is Life 360, or oh hey, I'm a suspicious news app, right? So usually like the lines between consumer spyware, location tracking, genuine location tracking services, and target spyware could be blurry sometimes, of course. Of course, obviously there are clear definitions, but in terms of like pure functionality, like the difference between a find my like location in which like you didn't know you have it enabled could potentially enable your abusive spouse to track you the same way as if this spouse were to install PC Tattletale on your phone. Obviously, like this person would not have had the capability to like purchase and send Pegasus after you. That's something I had to tell my clients constantly. But a lot of times we're trying to look for these apps like on your device, and usually regardless if it's iPhone or Android. Because sometimes even if like you have like like a very secure phone, at the end of the day, if you trust someone with your phone, like they can install anything onto it, right? And I'm not trying to encourage like paranoia about your partner. Obviously, you should trust them if they are a good person, right? But at the end of the day, like if you believe that this could happen to you, chances are you probably know the warning signs ahead of time. Like perhaps your partner is controlling, and perhaps your partner wants to know a lot about your location, and this person has to be very technically knowledgeable. I wouldn't be surprised if they like one day installed a suspicious news app on your phone, for example, which ends up being one of these stalkerware suites. So then again, like if you do suspect that you do have stalkerware installed, even after checking whether you're currently sharing your location with this person on Life 360 or Apple's Find My, um, try to like look for these suspicious apps. Like do like an occasional audit of the apps you have installed. If there's anything that you don't recognize, note that down. Like seriously, take screenshots, record it for like evidence, right? In case you're undergoing, for example, divorce proceedings, right? Or other criminal suite lawsuits, and then like record it and delete it. Or even better, like give it to the police and have them record it too. Of course, like this is only in cases where you are in an abusive environment and you do need to have this word the police. But namely speaking, though, there's a lot of methods you can do to actually like mitigate this if you do have like stalkerware installed on your phone, because that is frankly illegal. If you don't do it without our consent, like your partner could easily be thrown in jail for that. So keep that in mind that the law is on your side in this case.
Just a real quick couple of real quick CYAs. Number one, we're not lawyers. This is not legal advice.
We're not
But
lawyers.
yeah, but one thing I want to add on to that is delete it only if you're in a safe position to do so, because a lot of the time when you delete that kind of spyware, they'll know one way or another. Either it'll tell them on their little dashboard that it was deleted, or they'll just suddenly notice like, oh, suddenly I can't see location info, I can't see screenshots. I like one way or another, they'll probably know. So just take that into account. If you're going to delete something like that, make sure like you're already in a safe position where they can't do something to you. So yeah,
Yeah, indeed. Like if you are in still an abusive environment, your focus should be to at least leave that abusive environment, of course. But just like echo what Nate said, like if you are in a safe environment, but you still for some reason still like get harassing messages or still get like stalked by this person, um, make sure to record that down for future use. Like in court, for example, and delete, of course, to preserve your own safety as well. And also, we're not lawyers, as Nate said. I am not qualified to give you any legal advice. Please seek a lawyer, or contact like your local cities like social services if you need help. If you live in New York City, for example, there's a no longer affiliated with Cornell Tech, but Cornell Tech's Clinton Tech Abuse is a wonderful resource if you suspect you're like the victim of technology abuse in your relationships. So keep that in mind, though. Like if you do need help in New York City specifically, you can always visit a Family Justice Center and to meet with a city social worker. And I refer you to one of many services, including domestic violence, centers or shelters, and even Clinton tech abuse as well. If you suspect you have like a form of targeted spyware, so just keep that in mind though, for future use, if you believe this situation doesn't impact you.
for sure. Real quick before we move on to the next story, Sod This All sent 5 Privacy Guides gift memberships, which were snatched up by some people. So thank you very much, Sod This All. And for those of you who received those memberships, you now have access to the Privacy is like Broccoli video that we mentioned up at the top. And real quick on that note, actually, somebody in the forum did ask about that. They said they weren't able to see it yet on the forum. The forum pulls from PeerTube, I believe. So my it should be available really soon on PeerTube. So if you don't see it yet, just keep an eye out for it. That's what I'm trying to get at. And also, just as a quick shout out, I keep drinking out of this Privacy Guides water bottle. You guys can get that at shop.privacyguides.org. So yeah,
That's a wonderful
which
water
it needs
bottle.
refill.
I can confirm it's an amazing, and we have like not only just that too. We have a full completely metal bottle as well,
Oh
and a
yeah,
shirt, and a
yeah, we
poster,
have all kinds of stuff there.
and a bunch of
Posters.
hoodies as well.
That's yeah. I should get a hoodie. It's winter is still upon us, and I don't even think it's the coldest month yet. So, anyways, yeah. All right, we're gonna move on to a story that God just won't go away. Cryptocurrency theft attacks traced to the 2022 Lastpass data breach. So, I mean, really, the headline kind of sums it up. So, for those of you who don't know, in 2022, the password manager Lastpass had a data breach. And like, I cannot emphasize how bad this data breach was, guys, because first of all, it like, I'm going to give it to you in chronological order. No. Let me go ahead and give it to you the exact way they gave it to us. So on December 23rd, which is a Friday, in the afternoon, LastPass quietly announced this data breach. And correct me if I'm wrong if you know, but I think didn't they even like a no index the announcement so that it wouldn't show up in search engines? Do you know
I
anything?
I remember when this happened. I completely forgot, but I remember it was so quiet. I was like, wait,
Yeah.
I was a LastPass user. What's going on?
Okay, it may or may not have been no indexed. A lot of companies were doing that at the time this happened, so I may be confusing them with someone else. But they
Mm.
definitely released it at like 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon which is basically their way of like, oh, hopefully everybody, because again, December 23rd, this is right before the Christmas break on a Friday. So basically they're counting on everybody's already left the office by now. Like everybody called it a half day because it's Friday before Christmas. They're probably going to have Monday and Tuesday off. Like by the time they come back in, there's going to be a million things in their inbox. They're not going to see this. Like they seriously went out of their way to sweep this under the rug. So they announced it on the 23rd. And they tried to play it down and be like, oh, we had this incident. Like maybe you should change your passwords or something. Anyways, long story short, what happened is one of their work from home, or I don't know if he was permanently work from home or he just happened to be home that day, but one of their engineers, his home media server, his Plex server got compromised. And because of that compromise, the attacker was able to pivot through the network into his work computer, where he was then able to gain access to the company's network. And from there, they were able to steal tons of user vaults. And this story just gets worse the more I go. It turns out there were just tons of security vulnerabilities in these vaults. Like some of the fields were unencrypted, like the login, you know, that when you click the link and your password manager takes you straight there, for those of you who do that kind of thing. The login was unencrypted, which means that now we know where you have an account and we can convince more, or we can create more convincing phishing emails. Like if you don't have Amazon, then I'm not going to make an Amazon phishing email. But if you have I don't know, Microsoft 365, well, then I'm going to make a Microsoft email. So anyways, that was unencrypted. Basically passwords, and I'm really dumbing this down, but like passwords were being very poorly hashed. A lot of users were not using, and I mean, granted, this is not to victim blame, but this is the user's fault, but LastPass did not help this situation any. A lot of users were not using very strong master passwords, so they were very easily cracked. And I'm telling you, this was like a cascading data breach. If you haven't heard about this, like go and look up some of the stories because it just gets worse the more you dig. Anyways, so LastPass had this data breach, tons of the actual vaults, by the way, like it wasn't like, oh, we hacked into the vault. It's like we took a copy of the vault and now we can take all the time in the world trying to crack it, which is exactly what's been happening. Because shortly after this breach happened, we started immediately seeing a rash of crypto thefts. And the only thing that they all had in common, like all these people swore up and down, they're like, no, I'm using an offline wallet. Like I've got a really strong password. I've got two-factor. I've got all this stuff enabled. The only thing they all had in common was they used LastPass and they stored their seeds in LastPass. And that's basically the update. Is even now, I think this was technically in late 2025, but as late as late 2025, yeah, it says September 2025, we have been seeing waves of attacks as the hackers, the criminals are able to decrypt more and more vaults. They'll decrypt another set of vaults, they'll go out and steal the crypto. They'll decrypt another set of vaults, they'll go out and steal the crypto. So yeah, it's just, oh my God. Actually, we had somebody commented, let me see if I can find it real quick because it genuinely made me laugh and I really appreciate it. Somebody commented on this story. They said, LastPass is the gift that keeps on giving with their breaches. The monumental idiocy of its existence still is something we should all ponder upon. Sorry, I got a good laugh out of that one. But yeah, also real quick, I was looking at their website the other day for unrelated reasons, and the PR spin they have put on this in their FAQ is epic. If any of you are like going to school for PR, you should go read that because I don't think I could do any better. I don't think anyone could do any better. It's pathetic, but epic. Anyways, enough trash talking aside. So we like password managers. We strongly recommend them because it's just unrealistic to expect people to remember unique passwords. What is it like? The average person has somewhere around like 200 and something logins, and they're all supposed to be unique, strong passwords, right? And even if you're one of those people who's like, oh, use a passphrase because it's easier to remember, you're going to remember 250 passphrases, especially when you don't use all of them every single day. I doubt that. And also you can't use passphrases on all websites because some of them are real sticklers about what your password has to look like. So, I mean, if you want to go ahead and keep a notebook, like I guess you could, but point being, the enemy here is not password managers. The enemy here is to pick good password managers. Open source is not a panacea or a silver bullet that fixes everything, but we really do feel that it's a great start, especially in security. Like if something is open source, it's much easier for people to put eyes on it. Like that actually happened to Bitwarden. After this, a bunch of people went and looked at Bitwarden and they were like, oh, this isn't bad necessarily, but you could actually make your user master password stronger by doing this. And Bitwarden was like, you know what? You're right. We're going to do that. And then they did. So yeah, it's, man, I don't know. Do you think there's anything I didn't cover on that one?
Yeah, I also want
Any
to keep
thoughts?
I also want to keep in mind as well is that like remember this is like a gang of Russian link like hackers who are like sophisticated, like who, mind you, were able to download a copy of these vaults, keep them for the past 3 years, to slowly and surely like breaking and cracking into these vaults like forever. So if you were impacted by this breach, if you were a LastPass user who remembered that you had, like your seed, like in, like one of your secure note section, for example, on LastPass, like consider like changing wallets entirely. Like before, like this impacts you. Like if you do have a LastPass account, you know, at all, like keep that in mind and try and don't. It's never too late to change your passwords or to like change wallets, or else like this may actually happen to you. Um, but yeah, like another thing I also want to comment on as well, Nate, is like, like you said it perfectly, like LastPass did an amazing, epic, but ultimately like pathetic PR spin, right? Uh, I also like remember like they were like severely downplaying the what happened like during the breach. They're like, okay, listen, the vaults were leaked, but not your passwords. That's a good thing, right? Because your passwords weren't leaked. Until I realized that ironically the vaults were the worst part of it because yeah, like they weren't able to decrack it immediately, but it could take forever to decrack it, eventually. And not everyone uses strong passwords for your, master password. Like I recall like there's probably a lot of people who's probably had like password 123 into their like password manager because they never expected that anyone actually crack into it. Obviously, the information is false, but hey, it's just it is how it is. Like people make mistakes. You should never victim blame. And ultimately, at the end of the day, like the fact they tried downplaying this as like a non-catastrophic data breach is insane. But yeah,
Yeah,
I
for
actually have a
sure.
question for you, Nate. About I guess the alternatives. So let's say like someone like in our audience is afraid of cloud-based like password managers, even though like a lot of them are very reputable, like Bitwarden, 1Password, uh, Proton Pass. I was just wondering though, like, is there anything that people can do, like, if they do want to like switch to like self-hosted, like versions of like password managers? Like, do you have any security, like, advice for them? Like, how could they make sure that like their like let's say home lab or home server, for example, like has like a good password manager? Like, what do you recommend?
Well, there's actually a couple answers to that because there's things like if you don't want to do any self-hosting or anything like that, there's like KeyPass XE, right? And there's like different clients. Like I think KeyPass DX is a really popular one for Android, and um, I think KeyPassium is like kind of people's favorites for iOS now. And I use KeyPass XE. So me personally, I actually have like a dual password manager setup. I have Bitwarden for things that either I need to like share with my wife or things that I need to like log in on mobile from time to time, but the majority of my passwords are in KeyPass XE. Right here, this is actually a Cube's computer for those who know what that is, and it's in like a little like a what do you call it? Like a little air gapped virtual
Mhm.
machine, quote unquote air gapped. So that's where I keep the majority of my passwords. But there's things like KeyPass. There's I haven't used this one myself, but on the website we list GoPass, which is designed for the command line, so it may not be for everybody. But again, that's another offline option there. If you want something that is online but is not uh, run by on someone else's cloud, as you were talking about, yeah, Bitwarden does actually offer a self-hosting option. There is, I don't know if we officially recommend this, but I know there's a really popular one in the privacy community called Vault Warden, which is supposed to be kind of more like a lightweight version of Bitwarden. Super popular in the privacy community. Um, some people have like a local workaround, like they'll use KeyPass and then they'll use a what is it like Sync thing or one of those services that will like if you're on the same LAN, it'll sync. So there's not really like a server per se, but then like every day at the end of the day when you come home, your vault will sync up with all your other devices. So it stays in sync even though it's never really online per se. So I mean, yeah, there's definitely a lot of really good options out there. Man, I feel like there is one that I'm forgetting on the self-hosted front. I don't know. Um, Yeah, a lot of people will do like they'll use KeyPass, but they'll put their vault in like Proton Drive or something. Personal opinion, I think at that point you're just reinventing the password manager wheel, and I don't understand why you wouldn't go with one of the open source ones. But that is an option if you'd rather do that. So yeah, I mean it's really sky's the limit. There's some pretty good options out there for password managers. Fortunately, just make sure that you're finding one that's reputable and trusted, and yeah, has been vetted, all that kind of fun stuff. So me navigate back to the notes here.
I
Um,
think like that's the end of like what we're going to cover for our main stories. And now we're
yeah,
transition on to forum updates. As always, there's always, a lot of activity on the forum. So let's highlight some of the interesting discussion that's happening here. So you might remember what Nate said, right? About, a potential story revolving Proton, some drama. And unfortunately, it involves not only like Proton, but also the former founder of Standard Notes, um, specifically Mobitar. So for context, Mobitar, he is the founder of Standard Notes, which was acquired by Proton in 2024. Um, and since then he has left the Proton, as a he left the company to focus on his own project, right? And it turns out his new project was actually something called Shape, which is meant to compete with like something like Notion and Slack as a privacy conscious and encrypted alternative for folks like us who do love like these like idea of like a unified workspace and a unified knowledge base without the horrible like data protection like policies of something like Notion and Slack. Um, so personally, I was really looking forward to something like called Shape, but unfortunately, however, uh, it appears that Mobitar has signed a non-compete NDA with like Mark with Proton, and basically it is like he cannot he's not supposed to work with anything in the privacy space that directly competes with Proton or any of their products, right? So I have this like thrown to right here, like who's actually made by someone who was very concerned about this themselves. Didn't really know what to stand because obviously, like we love Standard Notes, we love Proton, but like it's always like concerning when like there has been a public spat between the two parties here. So what happened was like Mobitar posted on his like YouTube page, like kind of like talking about the drama, showing that email itself, and I'll just read the email out loud. Is that allowed, Nate?
I think so. I mean, he posted it in the forum, so
Yeah, yeah.
I
Okay,
would think
I'll
so.
read the email for everyone, but essentially it came from the head of legal from Proton called Mark Lobikin, who said that, "Hi Mo, hope you've been well and hope you had a good winter break. We took notice of your project Shape.work, for which a waitlist had recently been put online and the launch has been announced in early 2026. For the avoidance of any doubt, we considered that what is advertised here would directly go against the non-compete they've agreed to in the Standard Notes Share Purchase Agreement Section 7, since the advertised project is clearly a privacy-focused productivity suite, which is similar to what is offered by Proton. I've been asked to remind you of it, and that's enforced on January 2027. Would therefore request you to make sure that this is not offered before the expiration of the non-compete as agreed. I remain available. Sincerely yours." Um, so I haven't really watched the full video yet, released by like Bitar, but I have like read through this thread and participated in it, and read a lot of Jonah's thoughts on it as well. But I seem to be the overwhelming consensus that while we love the idea of something like Shape to exist, it's really clear there is a non-compete agreement, and it's impossible to like kind of circumvent it besides like challenging the agreement itself in court, right? So I guess a lot of advice here is simply for like Mo to just delay the actual like release of Shape for next year. But it's such a complicated thing because delaying a product by another year can be devastating for a lot of products, right? There's obviously a lot of hype anticipation for Shape. I personally would love the idea of like something like that, which like a more friendly and privacy friendly like approach to something like Notion or Slack, which I have to use on a day-to-day basis for college work. So trust me, like I was really looking forward to Shape. Very sad to see it potentially maybe get delayed to 2027. Um, do you have any opinions and thoughts on this? And do you agree with like, like everyone, like general consensus of the thread?
I mean, I don't think I can see a general consensus. It seems that a lot of people have differing opinions, which is totally fine with me. I don't know. I think it's hard to say. I think Jonah made some really good points in this thread, which is I almost feel like this is Proton inadvertently admitting what direction. Because here's okay. Here's my personal opinion. I think that most of the products that Shape listed, I feel like are very different from what Proton is currently offering. Like you said, it's designed to be an encrypted workspace, encrypted encrypted workspace for teams and individuals. And so if you check their website, it says that they're going to offer one-on-one chats and team chats. They're going to offer discussion, quote, long form thought and strategy, papers, which is knowledge storage and transfer, and tasks. And Proton certainly does not have tasks. And I know that because my wife has straight up told me that is what is keeping her from switching completely over to Proton Calendar. Um, and Proton certainly publicly does not have chats. I don't think email counts as chats. It's an asynchronous medium. It's not supposed to do that. Um, Discussion and papers to me sound kind of like maybe like a Notion type thing, which I don't think Proton has at this moment. But I think the fact that Proton was willing to issue this, or not issue, but invoke this non compete, right? To me, it kind of says that the most likely scenario is that they feel like this is something that they're developing. Like, for example, maybe chat is included with what is it? The meat that's going to roll out someday. Or maybe papers. I mean, to be fair, papers could be too similar to Proton Docs. I'll give them that. But again, tasks. Like, I know that's something that people have been asking for years. I actually, real quick, I just saw someone in the chat said, "Bro, I've been trying to find a tasks end-to-end encrypted." Same. Trust me, same. So, it's maybe this is and at that point it really gets, I don't know, because like here's the thing, there's what is legal and what is moral do not always fit together nicely. We just talked about that with the story in Italy, right? So like, I don't know, it's who can make, I think, the better argument of, did he know that Proton is working on these tools, or is it just coincidence that he was like, man, we really need these tools, and Proton was like, yeah, no kidding, what do you think we're working on, dude? Did he know that? Did he not know that? I don't know. And that's a hard thing to prove, I think. I mean, unless you've got like emails that it's like, no, here's what we told him, this is what we're planning, and he totally knew that. It's also, somebody in the thread said that he should get a lawyer. Like, he should stop talking about this and get a lawyer. I mean, lawsuits take so long to work out. I think the smarter thing would just be to wait until next year. And I don't know, it sucks because I agree with you. Like, on the one hand, let's assume Proton's in the right? They're being kind of chill in the sense that like they're not immediately jumping to a lawsuit. They're just like, hey man, we need you to delay this. Like, we're not even telling you don't do it. We're just saying you need to wait until your term is up. And if they're in the right, that's a pretty reasonable thing to say. If he's in the right, a lot can happen in a year. And I mean, I certainly think he could use that year to like not sharpen, polish the product and keep adding features and get some like internal, not public, like maybe friends and family, and get some like testers to really polish it and put it through the ringer. And then in the meantime, he can maybe do some talks to kind of like keep himself I hate to use the word, but like relevant, so that way it's like, it's not just like, oh yeah, that dude, we haven't heard from him in a year. Where has he been? It's like, no, he's been giving talks and kind of keeping himself in the public eye. So it's, I don't know. I don't know who's right here. Somebody said they would have to see exactly what is it, Article 7 or whatever they were invoking, which he said he posted like a generic version of it that you can find online. It's pretty standard stuff, but I don't know. I think in my opinion, whether he's right or not, I feel like the best course is just to go ahead and lay quiet for another year. And I know that really sucks, but again, a lawsuit could take forever to work out. According to him, he didn't sell standard notes for a ton of money. So it's not like he's got tons of money to throw at a lawsuit. Certainly not like Proton does if they're acquiring companies. And it's just, it sucks though. I get it. It sucks. Like, if I don't know, if I wanted to release some new video over at my project, right, or a blog post, and I'm not trying to throw Jonah under the bus, but if Jonah was like, no, you can't do that, you have to wait until next year. Like, oh, that sucks. I really want to do that, but there's probably a good reason for that. It's probably the best move as opposed to like trying to sue him or something. It's just, I don't know. It's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate because it does look like an interesting project, and I hope it will do well whenever it launches. At least at this point in time, for the record, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. That maybe those words won't age well, but it's really unfortunate. But I think that's probably his best bet, is just to wait.
Yeah, I agree. I think waiting is definitely the best bet for him. I know that he's a very passionate individual who does like a lot of really amazing work, and like I generally wish him the best, like for shape, regardless of somehow he magically challenges that agreement, releases this year or delays it next year. But of course, there's always a lot of avenues for him to improve shape during this year delay if that does happen. Um, but yeah, like I personally like am a lot concerned about like what is Proton is planning though, because like if here's like because like they tend to like obviously want to protect themselves, as a company, right? With all these like non-compete agreements, and they're trying to be the new Google workspace of the privacy space. It kind of concerns you that okay, are they trying to beat an everything company, but a better everything company? If it's that's what they're trying to do, but their products so far aren't even like that feature complete yet, right? So it's either A, they really are trying to grasp the straws. They're saying that Shape is actually directly competing with them as a privacy oriented enterprise level software, or that they're trying to eventually like do something that that Shape is trying to do. Perhaps it's task management. I think like something like calendar or like some kind of feature within standard notes, for example, which is not owned by Proton, right? Like they do have some task management features, I believe. So it is entirely possible that like that is a direct like competition with Shape, because I'm sure like both of them like have the ability for you to actually like write down and mark down like what tasks you have to do, and because of that minor detail, it suddenly makes it like a competitor, right? So there are some like legal like justifications for it being like a competitor in space, but I just wish that there isn't really like a concept of a competitor in space. Like it's good to have more options, right? It's good to have like variety of things. And I don't know if I want Proton to be the everything company. Like maybe it's better for them to focus on a few spec products. But hey, I think that's like a conversation for another time, though. Nate, do you agree? Because I feel like we kind of discussed like this whole like is Proton products worth it not or not, yeah, multiple times. And I feel like this conversation has definitely reached that point a lot.
Yeah, it's I especially in the corporate world, I feel like products that try to do everything at once, this is what I always say is like products that try to do everything usually do everything half-assed, whereas opposed to products that like, no, this is our one thing and we do this one thing really well, usually do that one thing really well. So, and Proton especially, yeah, I mean this conversation has definitely been had a million times, like you said, and it's no secret. Like Proton is really not complete and they keep rolling out new products and it's like, okay, but like Proton Drive for Linux when, a decent Linux VPN when, like all these different mail features and like I said, like tasks for the calendar, like Proton. And don't get me wrong, I think Proton is, like you said, I think it's really good for the average person because the average person wants an ecosystem, whether that's smart or not. I know we've also had a lot of discussions about is it smart to put all your eggs in one basket? The average person either uses Gmail, Google Search, Google Calendar, Google Drive, Google this, Google that, or they use iCloud, iPhone, iCloud Drive, hide my email, iCloud VPN, whatever that's called. It's not really a VPN. Like people want something where they just log in and everything's there and it all just integrates seamlessly and they don't have to think about it. And I think Proton is the closest thing we have to that. But I would like to really see Proton focus a lot more on polishing their existing products before they keep rolling out something else. Because yeah, I think you could already make the argument that they're trying to do everything poorly, half-assed. And if they keep expanding, I don't see how that's going to fix anytime soon. So yeah, I
Indeed,
agree.
indeed. Yes. But anyways, moving on from the whole Proton debacle, I think it's great to talk about questions though. Just
Yeah.
pivoting over to the forum thread now. I know it's like one, potentially two questions. So I gotta read through them. JG, our wonderful loyal audience member has asked, question: can you discuss the worst case scenario here? What is it or can it be? I'm thinking Google completely stopping doing this or being closed source. Is this all in the realm of possibilities? Please reasonably speculate. Thank you. I think like we've kind of already speculated earlier, like in the stream. So if you do want to like scroll back there, kind of have a more detailed like discussion of it, like feel free to do so. We will include timestamps. Um, as for just like a summary, generally my opinion is, as someone who like isn't a software developer or a product manager who's responsible for all these like development models, right? Um, the worst case scenario in this point is that Google just simply deprioritizes like open source. Like I don't think they're closing off from it forever. I think there's a lot of benefit for like open source for them to this day. Like without like open source, right? They wouldn't be able to like, like have the level of development support like from all these OEM manufacturers. But if they ever pivot to like a closed source model in which like, okay, only these specific OEMs can have Android, right? It would be disastrous for everyone involved. And I don't think that will happen, but I think that would probably be the worst case scenario in which like they really focus on like making Android like that desktop operating system that they ever wanted to be. They want to make Android kind of like into the new Mac OS, like uh, iOS, like where they want more integration, right? And as a result of that more integration, their desire for Android to have like a desktop mode, for example, it makes it clear that they're trying to actively improve it in a way to compete with Apple. But in order to compete with Apple, you must become Apple. Um, and that's not always a good thing if if you're a company called Google. At least like Apple has some privacy protecting features here and there. But then again, for us open source enthusiasts out here, that would be disastrous. But yeah, Nate, what do you think is the worst case scenario?
I don't know. I think you make a really good point. I think Google going completely closed source. I don't understand how they've got billions and billions of dollars and they can't read a basic marketing book. The whole point of marketing is to find something that no one else is doing. And I mean, okay, not the whole point of marketing to be pedantic, but a major point of marketing, a major part of like running a successful business is to find something that nobody else is doing and to really focus in on that and fill that market need, right? So Google trying to be Apple just feels so counterintuitive. There's many reasons that people buy Google phones. And sure, for some of them, it's because it's cheap and they can't afford an iPhone, right? And, for those people, I'm sure they wish they had an iPhone. And so if Google was like, hey, we're going to be the Kmart version of an iPhone, for those of you who remember what Kmart is, then I'm sure those people would be like, sweet, now I get the blue bubble or whatever. Like those people would be thrilled. But there's still plenty of other people who like Android for Android, whether that's the customization, the side loading, the developer friendliness, whether that's the features. I mean, I've historically crapped all over Samsung phones. But I know some people online who have recently bought Samsung phones, and as they play around with it and learn new features, they'll be like, oh, it does this. That's really cool. And I'll be the first one to admit, like sitting here listening to them talk about it, I'm like, wow, that is really cool. I kind of wish my Pixel did that. Still not going to buy a Samsung because their security is abysmal, but that's beside the point. But that's what I mean is like certain Android phones, especially things like Samsung, they can do things that iPhones can't. And again, whether that's like super advanced developer stuff or end user stuff, that's what people want. So yeah, just trying to clone iPhone, I really don't think is going to work out very well for them because there's a lot of people like me that once all things are equal, it's like, well, then why would I stick with you? If I can't flash a custom OS on it and iPhone has better privacy, and we're not saying perfect privacy for the record, iPhone has better privacy. iPhone has really good security. They're all the same price. What's your selling point here? So yeah, I think I don't know. I think the worst case scenario that I'm scared of is that they stop publishing source code to the point, or they do something that it just becomes such a task that the custom developers like Calyx and Graphene just really have no point or no choice but to throw in the towel and just be like, we can't do this anymore. It's impossible to work with. And I think that's going to be a really dark day if that happens. That's my worst case scenario, to be honest with you. That's what I'm scared of.
Ooh, all right. But actually, on the contrary, let's do like a best case scenario. Just to be more positive here. So, like, let's say like they don't do closed source. Let's say it's actually like they're actually doing this for security reasons. This new trunk based like development model in which you will see these quarter. So what was formerly quarterly releases? I guess half year releases. We're gonna call it now
I think
biannual releases.
I was gonna
Whatever. I
say I
don't know.
think that's biannual, but don't quote me because honestly, I've never really been good at that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Anyways, like let's say like the updates released in Q2 and Q4, right? They're fast, they're on time, and they actually ensure that like that's the only change like ever. Like, would that necessarily impact anyone? No, it's just a bummer that we don't get to see new features roll out more quickly across these various quarters, right? And something that I am very interested in is like what did he mean by security here? Like, is it the code they're making more safe? Possibly. I feel like we would definitely need to have like someone who's like an active software like developer, like in these like big tech companies, actually explain that okay, what do these software like development models mean, and is actually what does it mean to actually make safe, secure code, right? So I guess that's something like I really think I would love to talk about in the future, though. But yeah. So what do you think is the best case scenario, Nate?
Uh, I don't know. I mean, the best case scenario is definitely not going to happen anytime in the next 3 years, which is that the US cracks down on some kind of anti-competition thing like the UK or the not the UK, the EU did, and Google kind of has to back off because somebody can make a really good argument in court that this is anti-competitive behavior. Or there's enough public pressure. Either way, I don't care. Both roads lead to Rome. I don't care how we get there. That I think would be the best case scenario, but unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen. So I think at that point, yeah, probably the scenario you painted where it's like this is a disruption, but hopefully it's just features and not security stuff.
Mhm.
And I know I just made a big point of saying like the average user and the default, right? But for those of us who are using things again like Graphene OS, it's it- we tend not to be super concerned with the features. Like, yeah, it'd be nice to have them, but they'll get here when they get here. I'm not really in a rush. As long as I have my security updates, I'm happy. And I think as long as we can maintain that, then it would be for us. I mean, for the developers, it's still a nightmare, right? Because now they have 6 months of changes to reverse engineer and try to figure out. But in terms of keeping things going and the user base, the end user, I think that would be probably the least bad. Let's say that it's the least bad scenario that I could envision.
Mm. And
Yeah.
one final question before we move to the YouTube chat, actually, just real quick. How would you feel about Android being spun off like from Google in a utopian future where somehow antitrust cases let them spin off, Android into a separate, let's say, nonprofit foundation, like the Android Foundation. I don't know. And there's actually a condominium of multiple companies and volunteers developing it. I don't know. Like, do you think that's ideal? Do you think that's like, would you think like they'll actually compromise on the security compared to like just one company developing it? Because I feel like Google has been historically been very good with secure coding, like a very
Yeah.
being secure, period, right? Like they have like they bought Mondian, right? And like they're well known for like, doing a lot of these like security disclosures, right? It's just they're horrible for privacy. I just want to know, did you feel like having a separate organization or like a spin-off, like would that necessarily harm the security of Android because they don't have the same corporate backing and integration with Google's like development process?
I don't think so because I feel and okay, I'm not really a business expert, so I could be wrong here,
Yeah.
but I feel like a lot of the time we don't see these companies completely spin off and just get hung out to dry like that. I think a lot of the time there is still a pretty healthy degree of support from the parent company. At least in these kinds of instances, right? Like I know there's companies where like, the parent company will acquire someone else and then after 5 years they're like, "Oh, we're not making as much money as we thought we would, so we're kicking them out and now you got to go find your own place to live." But in these kind of scenarios where they're being forcibly kicked out, they don't I feel like there's usually a lot of like backdoor kind of underhanded ways where it's like, "Oh no, they're an independent company, but also we still secretly fund them or whatever and cuz somehow it benefits us." So, I don't know, I guess it would depend on what it looked like. If it was like they're still part of Google, but they're supposed to have like separate leadership, separate governance, I think I don't know. It's so hard to say. I would have to know like what that company would look like. If it was some kind of consortium like you were just talking about where there's like a group of or a foundation leading them, first of all, I don't think it has to impact security. Let me just say that. I think that's a false flag and a choice that a lot of companies make, especially when they talk about like side loading. Oh, we're going to turn off side loading for security. And it's like, yeah, that's one way. Or I'm sure there's a lot of other ways to do it too. And you're choosing the one that's easy and also happens to benefit you. But I think, I don't know. I guess I'd really have to know more about what it looks like, who's involved. It could be bad, or it could be good, or it could just kick the can down the road to get us back where we are now. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think like it's I guess it's fun speculation, right, Nate?
Yeah, I mean, this is all just us guessing and, we don't have a crystal ball. If we do have a crystal ball, somebody please tell me the lotto numbers. But yeah, we're just kind of taking guesses here. We really don't know. And like we were saying with Proton, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. We don't know what Google's planning. Maybe this is really just like some kind of push for code efficiency and some misguided attempt at security. Maybe it is some secret way to try and not so secret way to try and like trap users in the ecosystem and stuff like that. I don't know, man. Unlike Google, I can't read minds. So,
Mm.
yeah.
But if you do have a crystal ball, like, and Nate wins the lottery, like, I'm just asking you specifically to donate to Privacy Guides.
Yes, please. Of
Tax-free
course.
donations.
Exactly.
All
Got to
right.
lower that tax overhead. So,
Of course, of course. All right, let's just look for some available questions either in the YouTube chat or the forum. We're doing a last call for questions now. But I do see a lot of like interesting comments though, so I'm gonna read them in the meantime. Um, Okay, a user by name of hotdog11011 pointed out to Jonah that the recommendations on Privacy Guides it says that Proton Mail can be bought on Proxy Store, but it's not on Proxy Store. And it says Proton Pass and Proton VPN are on proxy store, but not mail. Interesting.
Yeah,
I did not
because
know that.
he was saying in regards to, I think we were talking about LastPass. He mentioned at this point I'm only buying privacy products that accept Monero. And so Jonah was mentioning that you can buy some of Proton's products on Proxy Store, which is, I mean, it's a proxy like it says, but it's kind of a way to buy things through Monero using this third party vendor. So I've never used it
Mm,
myself, but that is one potential solution to not having to use Bitcoin or credit card or anything like that, which
mm,
has historically been a criticism of Proton. So
yeah.
yeah, I've been checking through. I do want to mention as I'm scrolling through here, Jordan mentioned Wyoming is catching all the strays. I think you picked Wyoming just because it just seems like a random place for a product to spring out of. Nothing against Wyoming. I actually had a coworker at my last job that went to Wyoming for like a month for work, and the pictures were beautiful. It looks awesome.
Mm,
So,
yeah. I
here's
actually
one
do.
actually. When we were, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I think for the Wyoming example, I think I actually saw an article where they're trying to propose like a law of some sorts. Let me search it up quickly, like a shield law. I
That's
think
what it
there
was.
is,
That's what you were talking about. You were talking about the
right?
shield law, and you're like, "Why Wyoming of all places?" And that's what it was. It's
Oh,
like
wait,
that's just
no.
not.
Yeah, it is real. Oh my god, there is a shield law. Wait, so it has without a shield law, then it increases a shield law. What? Honestly, I am confused. Wait, let me just read through this. But anyways, maybe we can ask that question before we actually share like, this information here.
I was going to mention when we were talking about Linux phones. This is obviously not an endorsement, but Drake and Black Knight said there is the FLX1 that's ready to ship right now. I'm not sure if it is because it says at the top that it's in stock, but then when I scrolled down, it said it was sold out. So maybe that was something else, and I just misread the website. Yeah, I mean, I don't. For the record, this is not an endorsement. I don't know anything about this here, but it looks like it's a Linux phone that's got their own OS based on Debian. I'm not sure about this name. It's FuriOS, because it's Furilabs, FURILABS.com. Um, so yeah, I don't know if they are doing that on purpose and it's a furry reference. But yeah, it says it's compatible with. I mean, you could use other versions of Android or Linux if you want, but they don't officially support them. It's just kind of a do at your own risk. Looks like they have hardware switches for the microphone, the modem, and the camera. They do support Android apps that you can get through Aurora Store. So yeah, I mean, I'd have to sit down and dig into this a little bit more. Again, it is based on Debian, which no shade on Debian, but they're not exactly known for their security. So I can already say that unless they've made significant changes under the hood to beef up security, like you and I were talking about earlier, it still wouldn't really compare to like Android or iPhone. But I will say that yeah, this does look, assuming all their claims are true, this does look like a user friendly, ready Linux phone that would potentially. I would honestly love to get my hands on this just to play around with it and see how mature it is. Because I mean, even if the security's not there, which is important for the record, I'm not trying to downplay that. The fact that there is a like user ready Linux phone would be huge for me because in my opinion, that's like 90% of the battle. Like once we get there, okay, fine. Like maybe we have to harden the distro or maybe even change distros, which I know I say like, oh, we'll just change the distro. I know that's not easy, but again, we already have PinePhone and like we have things that are. I guess what I'm saying is again, I feel like that's the biggest battle is getting it to a state where it's ready for the user. And if somebody's done that, I feel like that's the majority of the work right there. And from there, we can just kind of dial it in and get it better. So I don't know. Again, this is not an endorsement. I'm not saying it's you guys should go buy it, but it's certainly interesting, and I would love to know more about it. So I'm gonna try to look at this later because this is pretty neat.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna like quickly add this in right now. So like the shield law I was thinking about in Wyoming it was actually like it was in the right spirit, but of course I think I misremembered a critical detail. So there's something called the Granite Act, which is the guaranteeing rights against novel international tyranny and extortion. Which it's a proposed like saleable bill that kind of protects like Wyoming residents, all 500,000 of them, from foreign governments attempting to censor speech protected against the U.S. law and it targets laws related to online safety, hate speech, misinformation, disinformation, defamation, privacy, or harmful content. And his goal is to basically establish our private right of action against foreign individual agencies, allowing for civil judgment to be enforced through the seizure of foreign state assets in the U.S. Wow. Okay, so it's actually a reaction to these two laws. Interesting.
Yeah. We've been seeing quite a bit of that lately. I don't really want to comment on that because I have political
Yeah.
opinions, but
No comment, no
we've
comment. But makes
yeah.
sense given, like,
But that's the
like, the
thing.
current situation.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm.
Let me check through here. I don't know if we got any new questions.
How will this impact the options in Burger Town, says Starkle. Well, okay, for context for
He's
those that are listening in, there was a forum thread called, the options in Burger Town. Yeah, I think it was written by, like, something called the Privacy Dad, who has his own
yeah.
blog, and it kinda
I know the
describes,
privacy dad. I
like,
like him.
yeah, yeah. Cool guy. Has an amazing blog. I honestly really want to start writing blogs myself. Might
Mhm.
look at his website a little more personally. But yeah, I think like he wrote like a blog, and essentially what happens was like, okay, comparing Graphene OS and other like custom ROMs, and as like as the only like option in Burger Town, like you want McDonald's, you want Steak Shack, or you want Burger King, and it kind of sold as like we obviously want more options in Burger Town, or else we only have McDonald's. And McDonald's is great and all, but obviously, it's not ideal to have only one like good thing, right? And there was a huge amount of discussion out there. I'm talking like a lot, so much so like as someone who doesn't really have a strong opinion on whether or not like McDonald's should be the only burger in town. I don't really have a strong opinion on this, but I can do say though that it's like it's very funny to see how like if there's ever like something that impacts one burger, what we're gonna do if we only have that burger, What if our favorite burger and the only burger in town is gone? What do we do? That's like a metaphor makes sense at all.
I appreciate he tried to like think outside of the box with his metaphor. I understand it didn't really land with everybody. And even I, like when I originally read it, I had to read it a couple times. I was like, what is this about? Or what does he say? Because he says in the title that it's about Android ROMs, but I was like, what is he saying? What's he getting at? Um, yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of different philosophies in privacy, and I think not all of them are necessarily wrong. So yeah. I don't know. He has his own philosophy on that one. I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say there, but yeah, it was a fun read, at least, at very least. It was a fun read, but some people didn't like it, some people did. I don't know. It sparked discussion. I guess that's good. So
Yeah. Anything for the engagement. Another comment by hotdog11011. Something interesting I haven't seen talked about is Massachusetts passed a strong privacy law recently. And yes, you're correct actually. I'm not sure if in I think it was passed by the Senate. Um and then it's currently like I think last time I checked it was like sent to the lower house, or maybe it was signed already. I was not sure. I should definitely double check it. Thank you for bringing it up to me, but I was following that, of course, but I wanted to wait until like, it actually did get signed by Governor Healy. Um, for context, I am mostly based in the Massachusetts area, but I'm not like, a resident yet. So I'm actually like really interested to see if, like if it does have strong like opt out or like deleting data provisions. And if it does, hey, maybe I'll change my residency once away from Florida.
yeah, I haven't heard anything about this. This is not on my radar at all. But I definitely, if it passes, especially, I'd love to know more because yeah, I mean, always a fan of more giving people more privacy rights for sure. So Um, yeah, I'm not seeing a lot of questions. I don't know if there's any I missed that you wanted to address.
I don't see anything. I think like so far, like I'm really enjoying the engagement we're seeing in chat right now. Like I think like it's funny to see everyone like like joke around and like make references and all that. So like
Mhm.
I think it's really fun to see obviously like required to ask questions, but it's nice to see the community engage with their content and interact with you. So yeah, we really appreciate like your thoughts as always. And yeah, and since this is my last like episode with this week in privacy, I just want to extend like a huge thank you to our audience for like being with us as like we start up our podcast again. Before Nate and before like I was in like the podcast, I think like Jonah started up himself, and then Jordan joined him, and then I helped like substitute for like one of them in case like someone's busy. And then it's really nice to like have a long streak of visitors, like, like and seeing like so much growth like in our podcast. So I just want to say, like, just to close off, like, it was a genuine honor to like be on the show. Thank you, Nate, for like helping me with the whole process. And I feel like you add a lot of experience and charisma to this. So thank you so much. For this being my
Oh, thank you.
first ever podcast, I actually really enjoy being a male podcaster, And hey, you know what? Maybe I'll try again one day. Maybe I'll appear on as a guest and then this podcast in the future. We will never know. This is my final time with Privacy Guides. I'm always here. And yeah, I think like, it's a good time to end it, Nate.
I think so. Um, Yeah.
There he
So
is.
all the updates from This Week in Privacy will be shared on the blog every week. So sign up for the newsletter or subscribe with your favorite RSS reader if you want to stay tuned. For people who prefer audio, we also offer a podcast available on all podcast platforms and RSS. And this video will also be synced to PeerTube. So keep an eye out for that. Privacy Guides is an impartial nonprofit organization that is focused on building a strong privacy advocacy community and delivering the best digital privacy and consumer technology rights advice on the internet. If you want to support our mission, then you can make a donation on our website, privacyguides.org. To make a donation, click the red heart icon located in the top right corner of the page. You can contribute using standard fiat currency via debit or credit card, or you can donate anonymously using Monero or your favorite cryptocurrency. Becoming a paid member unlocks exclusive perks like early access to our video content, like the one that just came out today, priority during the This Week in Privacy live stream Q&A. You'll also get a cool badge on your profile in the Privacy Guides forum and the warm, fuzzy feeling of supporting independent media. So thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll be back next week.